Hey everyone, I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. We're excited to bring you another in our series of interviews with top leaders in health IT. And today's guests are Andrea Palmer, she's the CEO of Awake Labs, and Edward Amy, CEO of J. Nolan Community Services. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, so excited to have this discussion. It's a little out there for Healthcare IT Today, but really an interesting, unique product. But before we dive too much into that, Andrea, do you want to tell us about yourself and your company?
Sure. So I'm Andrea. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Awake Labs. We have a platform to measure stress and strong emotions in real time to help people with cognitive disabilities live more independently and have a better quality of life.
Awesome. Edward, tell us about yourself and your organization.
I'm Edward Amy. I'm the CEO of J. Nolan Community Services. We're an IDD support organization in California, both Southern and Northern California. Everything we do is in community. And so technology is a big part of the work that we do so that we can support people to be independent, live lives that they want to live, not lives that others have prescribed.
Yeah.
And so just to clarify an acronym, IDD is intellectual and developmental disabilities. So it is supporting people, mostly adults or exclusively adults at J. Nolan?
No, we all the way down to our youngest right now is 8 years old.
There you go.
Wow.
With intellectual and developmental disabilities like autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, people who maybe just need a little bit more support to do their activities of daily living or to learn or be able to participate in the community and achieve their life goals that we all have.
Thanks for explaining that. And I think what was interesting is you want people to stay at home. You don't want them to be in your facilities, which I think is, for us from a healthcare perspective is kind of a different twist in the model. Talk about that, like the goal of keeping them at home and helping them.
Yeah, it's about helping individuals to be part of and contributing to their community, right? Which we all do, right?
Yeah.
That's the goal. We all want to be part of community, however one defines that. And you can't do that in an institution. You can't do that segregated from your community. And so our goal, our whole mission is around supporting people to be independent and members of their community and contribute. Because I think what often happens in any kind of services, whether it's in the IDD, intellectual developmental disability arena, behavioral health, I think sometimes we get wrapped up in that the service provided is the end. And it's not. It's a means to an end, right? The reason we do what we do is to support the next step, right? Not, okay, we did that, that's awesome. No, it's we did that, what is it now for you as an individual?
That's awesome. So Andrea, obviously Awake Labs is focused on this area. Talk about your product and how it works and how it helps organizations like this.
Absolutely. So we have a platform that uses off-the-shelf wearables. We have mobile apps, and then we have a web dashboard. So this is our Fitbit app on our wearable right now. It measures physiological arousal in real time. So we say stress and strong emotions like agitation, frustration, anger, excitement, and we track that over the day. And if we detect that that's starting to increase, we can send an alert to the mobile phone. So one of the challenges sometimes with people who have a cognitive disability or IDD is that they sometimes don't understand when they're starting to feel anxious, or they have trouble communicating that to someone. And in some cases that escalation tends to, or their communication happens through their behavior as opposed to verbally to someone. Sure. And so this helps take a little bit of the guesswork out, or to help people understand when to use some self-regulation tools, or staff to be able to step in and maybe provide a simple redirection so it doesn't get to the point where that anxiety is kind of all-consuming and uncontrollable. So that's what the notifications to the mobile app are for, and then we have all of that data, all of those data available on the web dashboard for families or care teams or care managers to kind of look through that data, understand where some of the more challenging days are, try to identify some of those triggers.
So you see the whole history of how many times it happened and how often it happened? Is that? Yeah,
and times of day. So like every day, Tuesday in particular, and then you find out there's one support worker who works on Tuesday that maybe isn't, as helpful as some of the others, or they don't have as good of a relationship. And so it helps just provide a little bit more context to care providers, to support staff, and also to that person. So we've seen that they are more accepting of care because they understand those support workers are there for them
Gotcha.
and are able to step in when they need them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, it makes sense from a historical standpoint. How about like notifications? Do you notify the loved one, the caregiver, how does that work? And do you do those notifications?
Yeah, so it depends on the individual themselves and the level of support that they need. So if they're in they live at home or in their own apartment or something, they might get those notifications themselves if they have tools in place for how to kind of calm themselves down or self-regulate. If they're in a home that has maybe 10 hours a day of support staff or 24 hours a day of support staff, then they might get the notification or their supporter might. And so it's that person who's there who's able to kind of step in that moment. We're working on integrating with some more smart homes or some more kind of distant support. So when it gets to that level where someone might need to call them or be able to provide them, they're living independently, but they just need to check in, then we'll be able to help facilitate that as well.
That's awesome. So Edward, obviously you're a customer and you use this product. Tell us how it's been and maybe some stories around the experiences you've had with it.
Absolutely. I think when I first came into contact with Awake Labs and their team, and we were talking about their technology, the first thing that came to mind for me is like it is core with our mission. It's about independence, right? And I liked your question, like, well, who gets the notification? And in our arena and the work that we do, my immediate answer was, it's the individual's choice. They decide. And we have what we call our circle of support, which includes my staff. It includes family members, anybody the supported individual wants in that circle.
And it's different for each person because they get to choose.
Yeah, I have a
Personalized
circle of support where one of the individuals' dentist is part of that circle of support. Unique dentist, let me tell you.
I would say.
And I have another circle, their pastor.
Yeah, that makes
is
sense.
in the circle, and so when they come together and talk about how things are going for that individual, are the goals the individual has for themselves, are we reaching those? Are we supporting that person to do that? And so with that kind of a mindset, when I was talking with Andrea and the team at Awake Labs, it immediately came to mind. I'm like, this is not only is it something that yes, a support team could have, but it naturally and logically is set up to be able to even move that ever so more away from support and more to the individual taking care of it themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And it was almost painful actually the first time that we talked and they told me about their technology, because somebody that we support came to mind.
Okay.
Before I ever knew of this, and I'm like, wow, had we had this then, that individual would still have his job.
Really?
So we had an interview talked about, right? Behavior is communication, and we look at that. Everything's communication. And this young gentleman worked at a Home Depot, and not a lot. He doesn't talk a lot. Not a lot of words. He's not completely nonverbal, but it's really, really limited.
Sure.
And the more upset or agitated he gets, the less he's talking. And so it kind of you don't see it coming until he kind of blows the stack.
Yeah.
And his way of letting you know that it's gone too far is to tear your shirt off.
It's the whole thing.
Just boom, he just grabs it and down it goes. And he's a big guy.
He watches wrestling, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure he got that one. But, and different staff, as you work with someone and support someone and you're in relationship, you pick up on the other cues. And I thought to myself, wow, this actually represents an amazing opportunity for new staff, that sort of on-the-job training. Is like, look, this is how we work. And along the way, it's like, we'll say Bill in this case. Bill does not going to talk to you, right? You've got to watch for his, interaction with you, and if you see these things happening, right? And by the way, Bill has a smartwatch that lets him and if his agitation is building. And in this situation, he was a new staff was supporting him at work. He was doing a job. One of the managers came over and said, hey, I need you guys to water the plants. It's a hot day. Water the plants in the nursery. Staff interprets that as, hey, we got to go do that, right? And so, Bill was working on a task he was finishing. Staff was like, hey, we got to hurry up. We got to get that done because the job manager's this. And it's going on inside. And he just turns and bam, and off comes this staff's shirt in the Home Depot.
Wow.
Staff reacts because it's new to him.
Sure.
Customers see that. And the management at Home Depot loved Bill. They loved him. They
Sure.
was like, look, this is painful for us, but we
Customers did
can't
too, probably.
we can't have it because we can't have our customers don't know what was going on
Sure.
there. They can't come to our store and feel unsafe.
Mhm.
And I'm like, if I'd had that,
Right.
and all of a sudden, zzz,
Could have
right,
warned
he gets
him
a little
to take a
nervous,
break
like,
or
okay,
for
you know
someone to
what?
intervene.
Maybe I need to back off a little bit.
In this
right?
case, the staff intervention was
Was
leaving him
actually-
alone.
Yeah, just that simple. Like,
back
all right,
away.
Bill, we'll
Yeah.
finish that task, and then we'll go. And if the manager comes back, I'll just say, we're finishing up here. We'll be over there. It was very easy to change direction on that one. And again, no significant fault. That staff was new and didn't know
Sure.
the cues and took what the manager was saying. It's like, oh, I want Bill to be
Yeah.
successful in his job, so he's got to follow directions of the manager.
Sure.
And but yeah, I mean, as they were talking about the technology, that was playing in my mind.
Yeah,
And I'm
you
like,
can see
oh.
the story. Interesting.
But it's also so important just on training new staff and on-the-job training because in healthcare in general, there's a staffing crisis at
Sure,
all
right,
levels
absolutely.
of healthcare.
Right.
But in this industry, for direct support professionals, for
Yeah.
frontline staff, it has been a crisis before the pandemic and then since the pandemic.
Even worse.
Some states regulate the maximum wage for
Oh, really?
DSPs that
Wow.
they're able to receive, and they're
Yeah.
providing all types of support, including, the direct care, and then some cases it's more medical, and then some cases it's life goals and supporting people at work. And so
Coaching.
it's very complex and important work, and they're not getting paid for it.
not what they deserve.
And there's a very high turnover. It's 50 to 70% a year in some cases of turnover on staff. And so
That's
that
hard.
for a provider, that is the training, that is trying to get them to understand someone like Bill's response to that situation and understanding everything. So it just helps, give a little bit more context to
Sure.
get that maybe new staff or even old staff to say, what else is happening here that I'm not seeing?
Right.
And how do I change what I'm doing to support this person? Or how do I change the environment to help this person just live a little bit better and,
Yeah.
and be able to go through that situation calmly and with dignity in this case?
With dignity and less trauma, right?
Yeah.
Because even for the staff member, I mean, whoa, that was scary, but he didn't stop working with him. He was like, okay, well, I didn't react well to that one. He surprised me, but on they went for several years after that. They worked together. It's not a problem in that way, but it is traumatic for the individual.
Sure.
I think to myself, what would it be like if I just got so anxious that I slapped somebody here at a conference or something. I'm like in public watching other people. I'm like,
Sure.
how long would that take me to get over that?
Oh, wow.
Of wow,
Sure.
and so the support of individual dignity that really cool technology like this provides, because there's a lot coming on the market, but with smart homes that Henry mentioned, but this one is literally, it's non-intrusive. There's no stigma to it whatsoever.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're
lots of
wearing a
people
watch.
wearing watches, and if you're somebody that's kind of into the tech, all the other apps are still there too, and you're
Yeah.
using it for whatever you want in addition to this, and it's completely, unintrusive, but really, really foundationally game-changing for somebody. So that's why we got excited about it, and then so we began talking, and we started kind of looking into the groups of people within our organization. We don't do groups, but I mean the different service lines and
cohorts
locations and
and
those kinds of
personas,
things. And
if you
go,
will.
where can we bring this to bear and introduce it? So our first go was actually in Southern California, and a really lovely young lady who began to experience anxiety. I do believe that the pandemic just sent her over, right? For a lot of people that
Yeah,
happened.
I think so.
She had a lot of social anxiety, but she was working on it, and then got isolated, right? Like so many of us did.
Yep.
And then as things opened back up, the anxiety level of trying to just re-engage.
It was the opposite.
She'd get flooded, and she was experiencing it, what they call non-epileptic somatic seizures.
Okay.
So like a pseudo seizure. Fortunately, it's not actually a seizure because
Right.
there's a lot of issues around
Damage
the
to the
damage
brain.
to the brain
Right.
with that.
But it's the anxiety.
But it is such a
feels like.
flooding of anxiety, right? It's I think the best way to describe it is like the pinnacle of a panic attack,
Yep.
because it incapacitates you. Along with I don't want anybody to see that happen to me, right? So that actually adds to the anxiety. What if?
Right.
And so we introduced this and talked with her and her family, her support team, and it was actually it was a sweet and lovely conversation, because as I'm describing it to her, and she has an iPhone, she's all like down with that, but she goes, so if I'm somewhere and I start to feel anxious, will an alarm go off? I'm like, oh no, it's like however you said it. Like, hey, you have your phone, you turn it off to just vibrate. That's how it's going to alert you. You choose. Oh, okay. That was her only and it was a great question, right? Because
the alarm made her more anxious.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And her initial goals, as she's coming, we're all coming out of this pandemic. Her initial goals were to be able to go back to church. What was fun is especially with each individual choosing. She says, well, what kind of devices? I'm like, you pick. So it became a thing. Mom and her went shopping.
Exactly.
They picked the band and the color of it was awesome. So it's her thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as we launched, we talked about it, went over how the app works with her and her team. She said, well, who gets to have it? I'm like, that's up to you. Mm-hmm. She says, well, okay, I want my mom to have it. Sure. And she listed off a couple of staff. And I'm like, okay, awesome. It's up to you.
Yeah.
And as soon as we launched it, she went to church 4 times in a row, which was 3 Sundays and a Wednesday night that they went.
That's
before
cool.
having she did have, it doesn't erase it. It's not a magic bullet, right?
No.
Everything's gone. But she was able to go and see it and breathe.
Do the interventions that help.
It's just really powerful to see that happen, and it's completely in her control.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's cool.
And so the aspect of control, we've mentioned this a lot, is so important, especially for this industry, because for a long time, if you had an intellectual or developmental disability diagnosis of some sort, you were either institutionalized or you were kept kind of out of sight, out of mind for society. And even today, when you might go to the emergency room or other healthcare environments, unless the physicians are trained in this community, it's really hard to understand, what the baseline is versus, what the actual episode or symptom that they're in the ER is for. And so as a result, a lot of the times the care is about controlling that behavior, controlling that person. Right. And so we've moved away from this a lot in the US about using medication for control, like antipsychotic medication, even if they don't have, it's not warranted for a specific condition. Or restraints or seclusion or things like that. But that is still something that we're trying to get away from, of giving people back that choice in how, not only how they receive their health care, but how they receive supports and actually be able to participate in the community. So that's the big, a lot of providers like Jay Nolan, or all of the providers that we're working with, are about how do we keep people in the least restrictive setting possible and help them work towards where they want to live in the community and be able to have that choice and that agency to have some control over their lives and have the say in what they're able to do, because the individuals that Edward were talking about are 20, 30-year-olds who want to go to college and want to have a relationship and even just be friends with their neighbor or something like that. And a lot of the times the people in their lives are the staff who come in to support them, and so there's a lot of emphasis on that community participation. But then on the healthcare side, that gets into challenges of how do you measure quality in care like this? How do you measure the quality of care outside of HEDIS measures, which are very, medical focused? And so CMS only this year released some suggestions about measuring quality in home community-based services for the first time. And HEDIS measures have been in place for a long time. And some of these quality metrics are still based on the medical HEDIS measures, because those are still important. A lot of people with IDD also have, diabetes or other co-occurring conditions. But there's so much else, like the goal of going back to church, that's not something you can measure in a HEDIS measure.
Course.
But it's so fundamental to how that person enjoys their life and their own mental health and their own anxiety levels and their ability to take care of the rest of the healthcare kind of decisions. And so, we talk a lot about social determinants of health, and this industry has just been doing it for so much longer. We just don't call it that or don't recognize that. And
it's just the care that you provide.
Yeah, and everyone's kind of catching up to it.
Well, as we're moving to, outcomes and value-based, it's like we're able to speak into that conversation and say, a value, based scenario or an outcomes-based scenario really depends on that individual, right? Going back to church for her, somebody else might be, I want to find another job now. Now that I have this, I can. In his case, Bill actually does a lot of things. Awesome. Talk about contributing back to the environment, his community. He does a lot of volunteer work now.
Awesome.
Because they can come, show up, do something, and then go and not have a lot of stress, right? He's also a cancer survivor. And as Andrea mentioned, this oftentimes the only medical care, sort of contact tends to be the emergency room, right? And again, with the young lady we talked about, I mean, since working with the Wake Lab, she's gone to the emergency room 0 times.
Wow.
Because it began to be a communication. I'm afraid, I'm overwhelmed, I'll feel safe there because there are doctors and people around.
Right.
And now it's like, I can derail that. I can slow that down. I can talk to the person sitting next to me and feel safe because they're looking, in essence, we're both looking at what's going on inside of me.
Right.
It's not happening to me now.
Yeah.
Right? I'm engaging with it.
Yeah. What a great use of remote patient monitoring, right? In this whole area that, we've covered a lot at Healthcare IT today. So this is really interesting. I love all these stories and I love your passion for the work you're doing.
You can tell.
Yeah. Where can people go to learn more about Awake Labs?
They can go to our website, awakelabs.com. We also are on Twitter and LinkedIn pretty actively.
Awesome.
There's some great case studies, not yet the ones that Edward mentioned.
We will be, but there's some great ones on there.
There's always more to write.
Yeah, there are a couple more about reducing ER visits and psych inpatient admissions, reducing seclusion and PRNs, which are as-needed antipsychotic medication, helping people have better relationships with their families in order to do things. So all of those case studies are on our website, but and also our contact information is as well.
Cool. Andrea, Edward, I appreciate you taking time, and thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.